They painted a ship to look insane. And it worked. Picture this. You're a German U-boat commander in 1917. You press your eye to the periscope. Through the gray Atlantic haze, you spot a target, a British merchant ship. You need to calculate its speed, its heading, its distance. You need all three to aim your torpedo, because a torpedo doesn't chase its target. It travels in a straight line. You fire where the ship will be, not where it is. Get any one of those calculations wrong, and you've wasted a torpedo and revealed your position. Now imagine the ship you're looking at is covered in Dazzle camouflage. Bold, jagged, clashing geometric patterns, black triangles slamming into white curves, stripes running one direction on the bow, the opposite direction on the stern. How fast is it moving? Which way is it heading? Is that the front or the back? You can't tell. And that confusion, that 3 seconds of hesitation, might be the difference between a kill and a miss. This is one of the strangest stories of World War I, a story about how art became a weapon at sea, and how the most outrageous paint jobs in naval history may have saved thousands of lives during World War I. By 1917, Britain was losing the war at sea. Not in grand fleet engagements, Jutland had come and gone, but in the slow, suffocating campaign of unrestricted submarine warfare. German U-boats were sinking Allied merchant vessels at a catastrophic rate. In April 1917 alone, U-boats destroyed over 880,000 tons of Allied shipping. At that pace, Britain would run out of food within weeks. The country that ruled the waves was being strangled by an enemy it couldn't see. The Admiralty tried everything: armed escorts, depth charges, submarine nets, smokescreens. Nothing worked well enough. The U-boats were too numerous, too effective, too difficult to find. And traditional camouflage, painting ships gray to blend with the ocean, was nearly useless. A ship is enormous. It moves. It trails smoke. You cannot hide something that large on open water. The question wasn't how to make ships invisible. The question was something far more creative. Enter Norman Wilkinson, a marine painter, a Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve officer, a man who spent his career studying how light played on water, how the eye perceived shapes against the horizon, how perspective could deceive. And in 1917, while serving on minesweeping patrol, Wilkinson had an idea that sounded absurd. Don't hide the ship. Confuse the enemy about what the ship is doing. If you find stories like this as fascinating as I do, consider subscribing. There's a new one every week. Wilkinson understood the core vulnerability of the U-boat attack. The commander had roughly 30 seconds at the periscope to estimate a target's course, speed, and range before firing. He used visual cues: the angle of the bow, the apparent length of the hull, the direction of the wake. What if you could disrupt every single one of those cues? What if the bow looked like the stern? What if the ship appeared to be heading northeast when it was actually heading southeast? What if the patterns on the hull made it impossible to judge distance? Wilkinson proposed painting ships with violently contrasting geometric patterns, not to conceal them, but to shatter their visual profile. He called it Dazzle camouflage. The Admiralty, desperate for any solution, agreed to let him try. Wilkinson assembled a team of artists, not engineers, not military strategists, but painters, sculptors, and designers. They worked from a studio in the Royal Academy of Arts in London, building small wooden models of ships and painting them with experimental patterns. Then they viewed each model through a periscope at measured distances, testing which designs created the most confusion. Every ship received a unique design. No two Dazzle schemes were identical because repetition would allow U-boat commanders to learn the patterns. The designs used principles of optical illusion. False bow waves were painted to suggest a ship was heading in a different direction. Converging lines altered the perceived length of the hull. High-contrast panels broke the ship's outline into fragments that the brain couldn't reassemble into a coherent shape. The effect was deliberately disorienting. These ships looked like floating cubist paintings, Picasso on the Atlantic. By the end of 1917, hundreds of merchant vessels and warships had been dazzled. By the armistice, over 4,000 ships wore these extraordinary patterns. Women from the Women's Royal Naval Service, the Wrens, did much of the actual painting, working in dockyards across Britain, scaling massive hulls to apply the designs with astonishing precision. Here's where the story gets complicated and honest. The statistical evidence for Dazzle camouflage's effectiveness was disputed even at the time. The Admiralty conducted studies. Some showed that dazzled ships were sunk at lower rates than undazzled ones. Others were inconclusive. The introduction of the convoy system in mid-1917 dramatically reduced losses on its own, making it difficult to isolate Dazzle's specific contribution. But here's what we do know. Captured German U-boat commanders and crew members reported that Dazzle-painted ships were significantly harder to target. Estimating course and speed through a periscope became unreliable. Torpedoes missed, shots went wide. The hesitation was real, and in submarine warfare, hesitation could be fatal for the submarine. There's also a deeper truth here. Dazzle camouflage mattered psychologically. It mattered to the merchant sailors who had been sailing through U-boat-infested waters with no protection except luck. Seeing their ship painted in those bold, defiant patterns gave them something they desperately needed, the feeling that someone was fighting for them, that someone had thought about their survival. Morale is invisible, but it is not nothing. After the war, Dazzle faded from military use. By World War II, advances in range-finding technology made it less effective, though the Americans and British briefly revived it. But Dazzle's true legacy was cultural. Those wild geometric patterns, born from desperation and artistic genius, influenced the Art Deco movement, fashion design, and graphic art for decades. The intersection of art and warfare had produced something genuinely beautiful, even as it served a grim purpose. Norman Wilkinson survived the war and returned to painting seascapes. He spent years fighting for proper recognition of his invention, frustrated that others occasionally claimed credit. He was eventually awarded a modest payment by the Royal Commission on awards to inventors. He never got rich from it. He never became famous for it during his lifetime. But his idea, born from an artist's understanding of how the eye can be deceived, represents something remarkable about the First World War. When technology failed, when conventional military thinking ran out of answers, it was creativity that stepped in. A marine painter looked at the deadliest weapon in the ocean and asked a question no admiral had thought to ask. Not how do we hide, but how do we confuse? And sometimes, confusion is enough. The next time you see a bold geometric pattern on a wall or a dress or a building, remember, it might trace its lineage back to the desperate, brilliant men and women who painted ships like fever dreams to fool the most dangerous weapon of the First World War. Subscribe. We uncover a forgotten story from World War I every single day. And if you've ever wondered how sound itself became a weapon in the trenches, that story is coming next.